Alex had always been a quiet person, the kind who preferred staying out of drama and keeping to themselves. They lived in a suburban neighborhood that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Rows of neatly trimmed lawns, flower beds bursting with color, and streets so clean you could eat off them. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business, whether they wanted to or not. And at the heart of all this nosiness was Karen, the self-proclaimed leader of the Homeowners Association, HOA. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was that asterisk neighbor. The one who showed up uninvited to inspect your holiday decorations, complained if your trash cans were visible from the street, and somehow managed to turn every HOA meeting into a lecture about community values. She carried herself with an air of authority, as though being part of the HOA gave her permission to meddle in everyone's lives. Most people found her exhausting, but no one dared challenge her, not directly, anyway. Things took a turn when Alex decided to install a pool in their backyard. It wasn't extravagant, just big enough for a relaxing swim on hot summer days. The moment the construction crew finished, word spread faster than wildfire. Neighbors stopped by under the guise of curiosity, complimenting Alex on their new addition, while secretly sizing it up. Some even joked about throwing pool parties, but Alex made it clear the pool was private. They put up a simple sign that read "Private Property" near the gate, hoping it would deter anyone from getting ideas. At first, everything seemed fine. Alex enjoyed their peaceful oasis, soaking up the sun and taking refreshing dips after long workdays. But then, strange things started happening. Towels appeared on the patio chairs, floaties bobbed lazily in the water, and tiny footprints marked the concrete around the pool deck. At first, Alex thought it might be kids sneaking in, but one day they caught Karen lounging by the pool like she owned the place. "What are you doing here?" Alex asked, trying to keep their voice steady despite their rising frustration. "Oh, hi, Alex," Karen chirped, barely looking up from her magazine. "I hope you don't mind. I figured since we're all part of this wonderful community, sharing amenities is only natural." "Sharing? This isn't a community amenity. It's my personal property," Alex replied firmly. Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be so stingy. You have plenty of space, and it's not like you're using it 24/7. Besides, I pay my HOA dues, so technically I'm entitled to enjoy these perks." Alex couldn't believe what they were hearing. Entitled didn't even begin to describe Karen's attitude. No amount of reasoning seemed to get through to her. Every time Alex confronted her, Karen brushed them off with excuses or twisted logic. It became clear that Karen saw the rules and basic respect as mere suggestions rather than guidelines to follow. As weeks went by, Alex grew more irritated. They worked hard for that pool, saving up for months and dealing with the headaches of installation. Yet here was Karen, treating it like her own personal resort. Something had to give. But how do you deal with someone who refuses to listen and thinks they're above the rules? Little did Alex know, their quiet frustration was about to spark a plan that would make waves in the neighborhood and teach Karen a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. Alex knew they couldn't just ignore the situation. Every time they came home to find Karen lounging by their pool or evidence of her visit, like wet footprints on the patio, it felt like a punch to the gut. This was their space, their hard-earned sanctuary, and Karen was treating it like her own personal playground. Alex decided it was time to address the issue head-on, hoping that a calm and direct conversation would solve things once and for all. The next time Karen showed up uninvited, Alex approached her with forced politeness. "Karen," they began, forcing a smile, "can we talk for a minute?" Karen looked up from adjusting her sunglasses, clearly annoyed at being interrupted mid-tan. "What is it?" "Alex, I'm trying to relax here. I notice you've been using my pool quite a bit lately," Alex said, keeping their tone even. "I wanted to remind you that this is private property. The pool isn't part of any HOA amenities. It's mine. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't use it without asking." Karen blinked at them, as though Alex had just suggested something absurd. Private property, she scoffed. Come on, Alex, don't be so uptight. You're lucky to have such a nice setup, and sharing is what good neighbors do. Besides, it's not like you're using it all the time. That's not the point, Alex replied, frustration creeping into their voice. It's about respect. If I wanted to share my pool, I'd invite people over myself. But I don't. It's my decision. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Honestly, Alex, you need to learn how to be more community-minded. People are going to start thinking you're antisocial. Alex clenched their fists but took a deep breath, reminding themselves to stay calm. Arguing with Karen was like talking to a brick wall. She twisted everything to fit her narrative, no matter how unreasonable it sounded. Still, Alex tried one last time. Look, Karen, I'm asking nicely. Please stop using my pool. If you want to swim, there's a public pool 10 minutes away. Or better yet, install your own. Karen huffed, standing up and grabbing her towel. Fine, whatever. But don't come crying to me when everyone thinks you're a bad neighbor. With that, she strutted off, leaving Alex fuming. Determined to resolve the issue officially, Alex attended the next HOA meeting, hoping the board would back them up. They laid out the situation clearly, explaining how Karen had repeatedly trespassed despite multiple warnings. To Alex's dismay, the response was lukewarm at best. One member muttered something about keeping the peace, while another awkwardly avoided eye contact altogether. Even the board president shrugged, saying, well, Karen does bring a lot of energy to the association. It was infuriating. Here was Alex, following the rules and respecting boundaries, while Karen ran roughshod over everyone else's rights, simply because she believed she deserved special treatment. The lack of support left Alex feeling powerless, but also more determined than ever. Clearly, reasoning with Karen wasn't working, and appealing to the HOA was useless. Something had to change, but Alex knew they couldn't stoop to Karen's level. Whatever they did next had to be clever, harmless, and impossible to trace back to them. As Alex sat in their living room later that night, staring at the glowing blue light of the pool reflecting off the walls, an idea began to form. It started small, a flicker of mischief, but soon grew into something bigger. Maybe their asterisk was asterisk, a way to send Karen a message loud enough for her to hear, without crossing any lines. All it would take was a little creativity, and maybe some supplies from the internet. Alex spent the next few days stewing over their options. They weren't the type to lash out impulsively, but Karen's behavior and the HOA's refusal to help had pushed them to their limit. Sitting in front of their laptop one evening, Alex began searching for ways to reclaim control of their pool without causing real harm or breaking any laws. After hours of scrolling through forums and articles, they stumbled upon two products that sparked an idea: itching powder and blue pool dye. At first glance, it seemed silly, a prank straight out of a comedy movie. But the more Alex thought about it, the more perfect it felt. The itching powder was harmless yet irritating enough to make anyone uncomfortable, while the blue dye would turn the water into something unappealing and unnatural looking. Together, these items could send a clear message to Karen: stay out of my pool. Best of all, neither product posed any serious risk, so Alex wouldn't have to worry about legal consequences or guilt over hurting someone. The next day, Alex ordered the supplies online, opting for discreet packaging to avoid suspicion. When the package arrived a couple of days later, they carefully read the instructions, making sure they understood exactly how to use both items safely. The itching powder came with a warning to handle it carefully, as it clung easily to skin and clothing. The blue dye, on the other hand, promised vibrant results that would last several days before fading naturally. Armed with this knowledge, Alex started planning every detail of their operation. Timing was crucial. Alex knew Karen often visited the pool in the mornings when she thought no one was home, so they decided to act late at night under the cover of darkness. Around midnight, after double-checking that the neighborhood was quiet, Alex grabbed the supplies and headed outside. First, they sprinkled a generous amount of itching powder along the edges of the pool deck where Karen usually walked barefoot. Then, carrying the small vial of blue dye, Alex approached the water and poured its contents directly into the filter system, ensuring the color would spread evenly throughout the pool by morning. To avoid raising suspicions, Alex placed a temporary sign near the gate that read "Pool out of service, maintenance scheduled." It was vague enough to discourage anyone else from using the pool while also giving them plausible deniability if anyone asked questions later. As a final touch, Alex wiped down anything they'd touched to ensure there were no fingerprints or traces left behind. By the time they finished, the pool looked eerily inviting under the moonlight, its surface shimmering faintly with hints of electric blue. Standing back to admire their handiwork, Alex couldn't help but feel a mix of nerves and satisfaction. They weren't proud of resorting to such tactics, but desperation had driven them to think outside the box. If everything went according to plan, Karen would get the wake-up call she desperately needed, and maybe finally learn to respect boundaries. Still, Alex couldn't shake the tiniest bit of doubt lingering in the back of their mind. What if Karen didn't take the hint? Or worse, what if she figured out who was behind it? Only time would tell. For now, Alex locked up the house, turned off the lights, and climbed into bed, trying to ignore the butterflies fluttering in their stomach. Tomorrow would be interesting, to say the least. The next morning, Alex woke up earlier than usual, their heart racing with anticipation. They peeked through the blinds, watching as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the backyard. The pool looked even more striking now, its water glowing an unnatural shade of electric blue. It was almost mesmerizing, but Alex knew better than to admire it for too long. This wasn't about aesthetics, it was about sending a message. As the neighborhood began to stir, Alex kept one eye on the clock and the other on Karen's house. Sure enough, just after 9 a.m., Karen appeared, strolling toward their backyard like she owned the place. She wore her usual swimsuit under a flowing cover-up, complete with oversized sunglasses perched on her nose. Alex held their breath, silently urging her to notice the "Pool out of service" sign near the gate. But if Karen saw it, she didn't care. Without hesitation, she pushed open the gate and marched straight to the edge of the pool. For a moment, she froze, staring down at the water. Her brow furrowed beneath her sunglasses as she tilted her head slightly, clearly confused by the strange color. Alex imagined her mind racing. Was this some kind of cleaning process, a chemical treatment, or maybe something else entirely? Whatever thoughts were running through her head, they didn't stop her from proceeding. Shrugging dismissively, Karen tossed her towel onto a lounge chair and dove right in. Alex couldn't help but smirk as they watched from the safety of their living room window. Within seconds, Karen resurfaced, shaking her hair out of her face. At first, everything seemed normal. That is, until she started scratching. Her hands flew to her arms, then her legs, frantically rubbing against the invisible irritant clinging to her skin. Realization dawned quickly, and panic replaced her earlier confidence. She scrambled out of the pool, dripping blue-tinted water everywhere, and began brushing herself off as though trying to rid her body of whatever had lashed onto her. Her reaction was priceless. Karen spun around in circles, muttering under her breath, clearly embarrassed and infuriated. By now, a few neighbors had noticed the commotion and were peeking over fences or pausing during their morning routines. Some exchanged amused glances, while others outright laughed, though none dared intervene. Karen, oblivious to her growing audience, continued scratching furiously, her once smug demeanor replaced by sheer mortification. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Karen grabbed her towel and stormed off, leaving behind a trail of blue footprints on the concrete. As she disappeared into her own house, slamming the door shut behind her, Alex allowed themselves a small chuckle. The prank had worked exactly as planned. Not only had Karen gotten the message loud and clear, but the entire neighborhood had witnessed her dramatic exit. Still, by mid-afternoon, the story of Karen's bizarre pool incident had spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. It was impossible not to notice. After all, Karen wasn't exactly subtle about her outrage. She stormed around her yard, muttering loudly enough for anyone within earshot to hear, and made several dramatic phone calls that could only be described as venting sessions. Her exaggerated hand gestures and sharp tone carried across fences, ensuring no one missed a single detail of her version of events. The blue footprints leading from Alex's backyard to her front door didn't help matters either. They were hard to miss, almost like evidence left behind at a crime scene. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, piecing together what had happened. Some found it hilarious, sharing knowing looks whenever Karen passed by. Others pretended to sympathize with her, nodding politely while secretly relishing the spectacle. A few even admitted privately that they'd been tempted to confront Karen themselves after years of dealing with her entitled behavior, but none had dared to take action until now. Karen, meanwhile, wasted no time escalating the situation. That evening, she called an emergency HOA meeting, demanding immediate answers. When the board members gathered in the community center later that week, Karen launched into a tirade, accusing Alex of deliberately sabotaging her experience at the pool. "This is harassment," she declared, pacing back and forth like a lawyer arguing a case. "Someone went out of their way to ruin my day, and possibly poison me." Her accusations drew mixed reactions. Some board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly unsure how to respond. Others exchanged skeptical glances, well aware of Karen's tendency to exaggerate. The president of the HOA cleared his throat awkwardly. "Karen, we understand you're upset, but without proof, there isn't much we can do. Did you see who did this?" "No, I didn't see anyone," Karen snapped, throwing up her hands. "But who else would it be? It's obvious Alex is behind this. Who else has a motive?" The room fell silent. While everyone knew Karen had a history of overstepping boundaries, openly accusing Alex without evidence felt petty, even to those who weren't particularly fond of them. After a long pause, the president spoke again. "Look, Karen, we'll remind everyone about respecting private property during our next newsletter. But unless you have concrete proof tying Alex, or anyone else, to this incident, there's nothing more we can do." Karen sputtered in disbelief, clearly expecting the board to side with her. Instead, they issued a vague reminder about being considerate neighbors and adjourned the meeting shortly afterward. As people filed out of the room, whispers filled the air. One neighbor leaned over to another and muttered, "Honestly, if someone did pull a prank on Karen, maybe she deserved it." Word of the meeting quickly made its way back to Alex, thanks to a sympathetic neighbor who stopped by later that evening. "Don't worry," the neighbor said with a wink. "Most of us think Karen got exactly what she had coming." Alex smiled weakly, grateful for the support but still cautious. Karen might not have gotten official backing from the HOA, but that didn't mean she'd give up. If anything, her bruised ego would likely fuel her determination to retaliate. For now, though, Alex allowed themselves a small sense of victory. The prank hadn't just sent a message to Karen. It had sparked conversations among the neighbors, many of whom were quietly cheering Alex on. Sometimes, standing your ground, even in unconventional ways, could shift the balance of power in unexpected ways. Karen wasn't one to let things go quietly, and the days following the pool incident proved just how relentless she could be. Determined to make Alex's life miserable, she launched a full-scale campaign of nitpicking and complaints, targeting every minor detail about their property. Suddenly, Alex's mailbox was too close to the curb. Their lawn needed mowing immediately, and the color of their front door violated some obscure HOA guideline that no one had ever heard of before. Each new complaint arrived via an official-looking letter, complete with Karen's signature at the bottom. At first, Alex felt overwhelmed by the constant barrage of criticism. It seemed like every time they turned around, there was another issue to address or ignore altogether. But as the days went on, something interesting happened. Karen's tactics began to backfire. The more petty her grievances became, the less seriously people took her. Neighbors who had once tolerated her meddling now rolled their eyes whenever she walked past. Even members of the HOA board started distancing themselves, clearly tired of her drama. Sensing the shift in sentiment, Alex decided it was time to take control of the narrative. They organized a casual neighborhood barbecue, inviting everyone except Karen. It wasn't meant to be confrontational, just a friendly gathering to foster goodwill among the neighbors. On the day of the event, Alex set up tables in their backyard, complete with snacks, drinks, and music playing softly in the background. As guests arrived, they mingled easily, laughing and chatting as though they'd been waiting for an excuse to connect. During a lull in the conversation, Alex casually brought up the topic of boundaries. "You know," they said, leaning against the patio railing with a relaxed smile, "I've always believed that being a good neighbor means respecting each other's space. Whether it's someone's home, their yard, or even their pool, we all deserve a little privacy." The comment drew nods of agreement from several attendees. One neighbor chimed in, "Yeah, it's tough when people don't understand where the line is. Like my kid's bike got moved once because it was blocking the sidewalk. I mean, come on." Another added, "And don't get me started on those HOA letters. Sometimes it feels like rules are made up on the spot." Alex nodded sympathetically, but kept their tone light. "Exactly. That's why I think open communication is so important. If someone has a problem, they should feel comfortable talking about it directly instead of, well, making assumptions." Though Alex never mentioned Karen by name, the implication was clear and not lost on anyone present. By the end of the evening, several neighbors pulled Alex aside to express their support. "Don't let Karen get to you," one said earnestly. "We're glad you stood your ground. Honestly, she needs someone to call her out." As the sun set and the last guests left, Alex felt a renewed sense of confidence. Karen's antics were losing their sting, replaced by a growing wave of solidarity among the neighbors. And while Alex knew Karen wouldn't give up without a fight, they also knew they weren't alone anymore. For the first time in weeks, the future looked a little brighter and a lot less stressful. As the weeks rolled by, Karen's influence in the neighborhood began to crumble like sandcastles at high tide. Her endless complaints and attempts to rally support against Alex only served to isolate her further. Neighbors who had once tolerated, or even feared, her meddling now avoided her altogether. At HOA meetings, her passionate rants about community standards were met with polite indifference or stifled yawns. Even the board members seemed less eager to humor her demands, often brushing off her concerns with vague promises of looking into it later. Karen, however, refused to accept defeat gracefully. She doubled down on her efforts, filing more frivolous grievances and sending passive-aggressive emails to anyone who would listen. But instead of rallying allies, her behavior painted her as increasingly unreasonable. One particularly scathing letter she wrote to the HOA board ended up being shared among neighbors, anonymously, of course, leading to fits of laughter during coffee breaks and text chains. The phrase "blue pool dye" became a running joke no one dared say aloud, but everyone understood. For Alex, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be in their tightly controlled community. The pool remained untouched by uninvited guests, thanks in part to the lingering rumors of what happened last time. Some neighbors half-jokingly asked if Alex planned to booby-trap the backyard again, but most simply respected the boundaries Alex had set. The private property sign stayed firmly in place, though it was hardly necessary anymore. Word had spread that crossing Alex wasn't worth the trouble. Despite the tension, Alex made a point to stay friendly with their neighbors, waving hello during morning walks and offering help when someone needed an extra hand. This approach paid off. The same people who might have once hesitated to side against Karen now openly appreciated Alex's quiet determination. Conversations around the neighborhood shifted from gossiping about Karen to discussing ways to improve the community without her heavy-handed interference. For the first time in years, the HOA meetings felt less like lectures and more like actual discussions. As for Karen, her reign as the self-appointed queen of the HOA came to an unceremonious end. With dwindling support and growing resentment, she struggled to maintain her grip on the association. Eventually, she resigned from her position on the board, citing personal reasons. Whether this decision stemmed from embarrassment, frustration, or both, no one knew or cared enough to ask. These days, Karen kept mostly to herself, occasionally peeking out her window to glare at Alex's house, but rarely venturing outside. Alex couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction, not because they'd defeated Karen, but because they'd stood their ground in a way that inspired others to do the same. The prank hadn't just been about teaching Karen a lesson. It had sparked a subtle but meaningful shift in the neighborhood's dynamic. People were speaking up more, sharing their thoughts openly, and refusing to let fear dictate how they lived. On warm summer evenings, Alex sat by the pool, sipping lemonade and watching the sunlight dance across the water. Life wasn't perfect. It never was, but it was peaceful again. And while Alex never admitted to orchestrating the infamous blue dye incident, they didn't need to. Every time Karen walked past their yard, pointedly avoiding eye contact, Alex smiled to themselves. Sometimes, all it took to reclaim your peace was a little creativity and the courage to stand up for yourself.